Hello, listeners. So excited. We have Dr. Angela Kingdon, who is leading Autistic Advocate bestselling author and award-winning podcast host dedicated to advancing neurodiversity. She hosts the podcast Autistic Culture Podcast with Matt Lowry. If you remember him from a past season, he has been instrumental in sharing these amazing tools. And Angela is going to take us even further because they have a new book out, and it is called The Adult Autism Home Assessment, which I'm super excited to talk to Angela about. And she's exploring the richness of autistic life, highlighting deep thinking, sensory experiences, special interests, and communication differences through an autistic lens. And so excited. And Angela's story is really interesting to me as a mom and autistic kiddo, because Angela was diagnosed later in life at 39, and it's really been pivotal to her and her career. And now she advocates for others. So excited to have you on, Angela.
Yay, thanks for having me, Julie. It's fun to be here.
Well, tell us more about your journey, finding out at 39 about autism. What was that like?
That was a surprise, right? I it's such a weird when you're late diagnosed, it's such a good thing when you get a diagnosis in that you have this like lifelong mystery solved. And then it's like kind of a bad thing because you have this lifelong mystery solved and it wasn't like take this pill and everything goes away. Because it's a very complex environmental, so I'll say solution. There's no real solution, but it's a complex and environmental condition that you learn to manage. You don't get to just take a pill and it goes away like high cholesterol. Like I wish I could just take a statin or something. So growing up, everyone, including me, knew I was weird. So,
Mhm.
for instance, I had multiple teachers who would just move my desk to the hallway and put me in like a different book or a different class because I was so annoying in class because I asked so many questions and I would like finish the book before anyone else had started it or gotten to page two. So, like, all right, we got to do it. And they were well-meaning, great. These are positive experiences. Like, they were like, here's Angela. She's weird. We have to do something different for her. Let's create a whole second curriculum and put her in the hallway. In fifth grade, I was in charge. I don't know why, but I was given like a full-time job from the school to run the special ed department.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that was weird. In, I think, sophomore year of high school, I got the keys to the high school and I was in charge of the theater department. Like, not normal things were happening to me. Everyone knew that I was different, and it often caused problems. I'm telling you some good things just because I don't always like to have bad news. Everyone knew I was different. And then when I got my diagnosis, I thought everyone would be like, I have been wondering how great, we have a name for it. I can't wait to learn everything about what this is so we can support you. And instead, I got, you don't look autistic. Like,
Hmm.
you don't need a label. You're
Hmm.
just the way you are. And I'm like, but we happy we found out the thing that we, I think, have been work. I got called into, I got fired from every job I ever had. You know, at 18 months in, I'd get called down to HR for some infraction. And then I would argue until I was fired about why it wasn't an infraction because it was really like miscommunication. Like, so many things in my life were solved, but there is, because autism was defined differently. I really couldn't have been diagnosed in the 80s or 90s when I was growing up.
Yeah.
It wasn't defined in a way that I met the criteria because they were only studying
Hmm.
7-year-old boys. They weren't
Right.
studying girls. They weren't studying how autism is different. So I didn't meet any of the criteria. I wasn't doing those things.
Yep.
So I don't look autistic based on an old definition that was always wrong.
Right.
But now I think one of the reasons why we do the Autistic Culture Podcast is because autism needs a better PR department. Like, we
Hmm.
have some messaging problems. And even though the definition changed a long, long time ago, most people have really not caught up and they still have a
Mm-hmm.
very limited view of like basically wealthy white boys with high support needs, often that are non-speaking, frequently having at least the appearance of also an intellectual disability.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't look like any
So
of those
true.
things.
Well, and it's we know what we're exposed to. And I think the most infamous example, at least I'm in my 40s, and I remember the movie Rain Man, right? Like a lot of
Right.
people see that as the example. And it was almost like mimicked and made fun of that character, right? It was very
Gotta go
condescending
to
to,
Walmart. Yep.
yeah, eat fish sticks. Like I remember the things, and it was, portrayed as like very problematic behaviors, but of course it was through the neurotypical lens. And I think what you're talking about, Dr. Angela, is so important, this kind of rebranding problem that we have, quite frankly, in a lot of diversity work, but especially in autism. What do you wish, that people better understood about autism? What is part of the rebranding that's necessary?
I think the biggest thing, if I could like teach one thing to the whole world, it is Damian Milton's double empathy problem.
Mhm.
And I'm going to explain this really quickly. I was an exchange student in high school. I was actually an exchange student to Australia.
Oh,
And
fun.
even though like same language, I could watch TV there, like there are many things that are similar. Before I went, I had a whole education class on how Australia would be different. When I got there, I was taught about culture shock and kind of how to manage frustration with some of the ways Australians did things that made no sense. And then when I got home, I had a class on how to integrate those differences. It was clear to me it was a different culture. Maybe it
Mhm.
wasn't as hard as going to Japan, but everyone kind of respected that there were two different cultures. There was Australian culture, there was American culture. They were different, and it would be hard and awkward to learn
Mhm.
those and navigate those differences.
Yep.
And then I ended up marrying an Indian guy when I was older. And when I met my mother-in-law, the first thing she said to me was, "When do you shower? How often do you shower? And when do you shower?" And I thought like hello might have been more appropriate. But I was immediately flashback to the classes I had on cultural differences. And I was like, oh, there is something, this lady probably isn't mean. There's probably something I don't know about showering and Indian culture or Hindu culture or their ideas about American culture. And so I was like, I must learn about this culture I'm going to be a part of. And I respect it. I wasn't like Indian people are wrong because my mother in law asked me when I shower. And so, what the double empathy problem says is autism is a culture, and it is a culture that exists within every like neurotypical world. So in Australia and in Japan and whatever, but our culture shares some things that are familiar in any context. And if
Mhm.
you're interacting with us, since we're 10% of the population roughly, you're going to be, you should know some stuff about our culture because we have to learn stuff about your culture. We live in it. We're the minority, we're the neuro minority. And so just take some time. We all live together in this, wherever we live in this world. And if you can learn some things about our culture, you won't think it's so weird or rude that we ask you, how many times a day do you shower? Right. So there will be cultural differences, but you'll know better how to navigate them. So the reason this is called the double empathy problem is for years, people said autistic people don't have empathy. And then
Mhm.
this one guy at the University of Kent, a guy named Damian Milton, tested empathy with groups of a pair of neurotypicals, a pair of autistics, and one
Mhm.
autistic and one neurotypical. And when he did this, two autistics, perfect empathy. Two neurotypicals, perfect empathy. But it's when you combine a neurotypical and an autistic person that they're like, that person's an asshole. Like I
Mhm.
might have said about my mother-in-law, who is not an asshole. She's a lovely, lovely woman. So I would have just been like, "Ooh, what an asshole!" Like, hello,
You're like, this is inappropriate.
inappropriate. I had an empathy problem. And
Mhm.
then she would have an empathy problem because she didn't understand me. So she asked something weird. It's a double empathy problem or a cultural difference,
Yeah.
not autistic people don't have empathy. So we have plenty of empathy. We might even have more than you. Who knows? Everybody's different. So I don't know how much empathy you have, but um, but we have to understand and respect each other's cultures enough to know this person has empathy. It just looks different than mine.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard it described that way. A lot of time when I'm doing my day job with Allyship and corporate America, we talk about the importance of empathy, empathizing with people with different lived experiences from you. But that bridge is longer. Like the
Mhm.
bridge is shorter to people like me, right? I can empathize with other white women that are caregivers and that are straight and neurotypical, right? Because it's like I know what it's like to be that, but it's much harder to understand somebody that's very different from you. So the more different it is, the more empathetic effort is put in as well. And you're right, but for historically marginalized people, 10% of the population that's autistic, that you're living in a neurotypical world. You have to empathize all the time. The
Oh,
water is
hey, what do
typical
you
to
think
swim
we're
and
doing?
exist. You don't have a choice. Like you
Right.
have to. It's really interesting for me. One of the things I do, and I love some coaching on this if you have ideas, but I've just, I don't know, the last 2 years, I've learned more about autism than I had in, the previous 40 I've been on the planet. And I am continually shocked by what comes out of people's mouths when I say, Dylan, my daughter has autism. Like you said, like she doesn't look like she has autism. Like the first time someone said that, I was like, what? She doesn't have Down syndrome. Like it was not something that's visible.
But yeah,
I think
why do
people
you think
think of like
it's
other syndromes. I don't know if they're getting mixed up or like you said, they're thinking about I hate to use the word weird, but in a positive way, like a
yeah.
weird white boy, the kind of the poster child of autism. Like, she doesn't look like that. So I wonder, like, when these misunderstandings that people have about autism, like, what are some ways we can correct that? Like, I usually say, like, oh, what do you mean by that? Or, like, actually, one of the things I try to do is if she's, into she's very big into routines and, repeating behaviors and pattern recognition. And so I'll say, yeah, some autistic people experience this, or yeah, what you're saying right now, like just trying to normalize it for people, give people context of, oh, yeah, kids with autism sometimes do this. And so I'm trying to educate because I notice they are noticing something different, and I know they're about to say something that's probably not helpful. So it's like, before you do that, hey,
Yeah,
I'm
let
going
me
to
jump
catch you
in
off.
there. I have been learning so much too. Hmm, let's learn together.
Yes, like
Yeah.
please don't say something hurtful because I just want to scream. But I also know that I've probably said those things in my past life too. So I don't want to shame somebody because they're just noticing. But I wonder, like, when people are noticing or when people are making maybe general assumptions or stereotypes, like what is a good way, like you said, to call people in on that?
Okay, so first thing is obviously context matters, but one of the frequent things that I will hear as an autistic person is everyone's a little autistic. So I have people say this in a very nice way.
Same. They're like, oh, I have that too. I'm like, no, no, no. I don't think you're talking about the same thing.
Well, so I have a fun answer now to that one, which is at the Autistic Culture Podcast, we came up with a quiz. And so when somebody, and even before we had one, there are other quizzes online about autism. So when somebody says to me now, they're like, oh, everyone's a little autistic. I'm like, oh, in what ways? Do you want to take my autistic culture quiz? Like,
That's
that's,
wonderful.
I'm like, this is amazing. What ways are you autistic? Let's compare notes. And so I think even as a mom, you can do that. You can be
Yeah.
like, oh, did you have stuff as a kid? Like when you were little, do you remember things? Like one of the things Dylan does is she loves gathering up all her toys that are alike and putting them in piles and seeing them together. Did you do stuff like that? And then like they might
They
be a
self-sort out pretty quickly when I
they
describe
do.
the behaviors. Yeah.
But sometimes it's actually the reason people are saying everyone's a little autistic or even you don't look autistic, like the reason why their mouth might want to say that is because they are noticing autistic traits.
Mhm.
They don't feel empowered to claim that because it feels like I don't want to take up space that belongs to somebody with more support needs. And so I just often acknowledge it. And I will say something like, it's really funny. A lot of times people who say you don't look autistic are the ones who actually are also autistic and just didn't know it. I got to get you to take my quiz or go to Embrace Autism and take like you should have you taken a test? You should find out. because it's always the people that say that. So I like
That's
to
interesting.
turn it into, for me, now obviously it's different coming from an autistic person. If I wasn't autistic, it would probably be something like, it's so interesting how common that response is. I think I've seen that's like a book title. I think that's like a documentary title. So that must be like a common thing. And just to sort of take the emphasis off, because very rarely are those people trying to be jerks.
Yeah.
It just seems like words to say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. They're just
obviously,
trying to make it more comfortable and then
right.
relatable. Like, oh, I can relate to that too, but it minimizes the experience. I like what you gave me some coaching on earlier before we hit record too, is one of the things that people say is like, well, how bad is it? Or have you,
Mm.
what is her number? Like they want to know where she is on the spectrum or continuum. And, I feel like that's like really bold to ask something specific like that. Like, I wouldn't ask you if you're diabetic, like, how bad is it? Give me your, blood sample result.
What's your blood? What is your what is it called?
I
AOC?
know, I wouldn't even know how to ask that question. I'm not a doctor. So, but I know that people are being curious. You gave me some really good coaching of like high support needs or lower support
Yeah.
needs.
So like I have a really good friend. She's actually my college roommate. And her daughter is autistic with a lot of support needs. And it really, her friend has had to stop working. She's in a
Yeah,
significant caregiving
it's a
role,
lot.
and it's really very tiring and certainly a huge commitment. And so she was saying to me, she's like, but you talk about being autistic, but it's not like Katrina's daughter.
Mm,
And I know what she's trying to say. Like I hear where she's going. And the thing that I always remember is like Katrina's daughter is not a level. Katrina's daughter is not a category.
mhm.
Katrina's daughter is a person, and I
Right.
don't happen to know this person. So I can make some guesses, but I'm sure they're wrong. So what I immediately said is like, I have no idea what Katrina's daughter's support needs are, but I can tell you autistic people, just like not autistic people, have all different support
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah.
There neurotypical people that can't walk, that can't talk, that need help using the bathroom. There are autistic people with those problems. Like every single person on this planet has a different profile of support needs. And I don't have a ton of support needs right now, but I've had months where I couldn't leave a room in my house where
Mhm.
people needed to make sure I was fed and alive. So right now my support needs are pretty good, but I don't know what that's going to be like tomorrow. So if you just say
Yeah.
Angela is, a level 1, or sometimes people use
Not
the
static. Yeah.
Asperger's to mean like, oh, it's easy for her. It's easy for her to mask. Not every day, not always. And
Hmm.
every single person deserves the sovereignty and the respect of just
Hmm.
being like, oh, what does she need right now? Where is she at? Right. If you break your ankle, you have more support needs. You can't drive. Now look at all that. You're a non-driver. You need someone to give you rides. It's going to be a lot easier if you're somewhere that somebody can give you rides easily. Like, so I just think first that we're talking about people, not
Yeah.
categories.
Right. It reminds me of the work broader in diversity is that people aren't a monolith, right? You can belong to a group and have a lot of variation within a group. So not all women are the same. Not all people of
Right.
color are the same. Like autistic people are not all the same. And so some of it, I think, is just the lack of exposure, the lack of, you probably do know a lot of autistic people, but there's a lot of covering and there's a lot of minimizing those traits to kind of blend in and fit in with the dominant group too. So you may not even know how many people you are in community with. Um, and then I think people are just so awkward when they do experience that I sense the awkwardness. And so I try to be proactive and educate them or frame it so that they don't say these
But
things.
you can also see, and this is true for any minority population, how just because you happen to be born autistic, you are not born a great communicator, B, educated about autism, and C, you just might not have the energy or the spoons to keep educating people about autism. Like that just might not, you might want to educate people about something else completely. or nothing.
Right.
And so, like, I remember my best friend in college, this is back in the 90s, happened to be Black. And I regularly, as if it were her full-time job, would just ask her what Black people thought about everything. I would be like, oh, what do Black people think? Like, please speak on behalf of your like, and like,
Educate me, please.
I have no idea. We have since talked about it, but in many of those moments, I wouldn't have even registered if she just wasn't in the mood to educate me about whatever thing I needed to understand the history of, or if it was fun for her, or if she was just making it seem fun, because that was part of how she found ways to navigate society as somebody who was often moving in all white circles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They don't
some
want to talk
people
about that, right, all the time. Like it's exhausting living it, let alone having to also educate everyone else about it.
exactly. Exactly. And I will say that is one of the reasons why, especially now, I do what I do, because there have been times in my life where I definitely couldn't. And I call most of those times having young children. Yeah, like a young autistic, neurodivergent child. Like I had no extra spoons for 18 years, like nothing to spare. And so now that I'm
Hmm.
settled in certain ways and don't have young kids, um and I'm in a good mental health place right now, I'm like, I have to do this as often as I can, just to take some of the pressure off of people who may not want to be doing it and can now just send people to my podcast and be like, you just
Yeah.
listen.
And I love the podcast because, well, Matt's hilarious and you are like so good together as a duo, but also like famous people that happen to be autistic, right? Like I love the backstories. And just, I think with a lot of differences, things that are different from the typical lens, we tend to other and talk about as disadvantages. And you all do a great job of showing like the wonderful advantages that neurodiversity can bring. And my biggest learning has been just that this last few years is autism's not bad. Like people used to say, like almost treat it like it was bad. If I was like, hey, maybe this ran in our family. And like, my sister's like, it absolutely doesn't. That's insulting. It's like, whoa, like you're making a lot of assumptions about it being a negative thing. I'm just curious, where the origin is. And this whole, if it's not quote unquote fits into the normed behavior or social script, it's the other. And I just came to this conclusion like this. It's very simple aha moment of the world wasn't created for Dylan. It wasn't created with her in mind. And I need to be the advocate to help her and advocate or to help her navigate the world that wasn't created with her in mind. And you're right. I mean, I'm in the really taxing years of it. It's a lot of mental space. So I hope someday I can be more of a public advocate, but for now, it's really just advocating in the community and social circles that we're in. But it's not a bad thing. It's like, oh my gosh, what's possible? Because she clearly thinks very differently than the rest of our family. And so I look at it as like, what an amazing like gift. What are these like hidden talents or maybe I'm
But
not
I
talking
also
the
want to
right way.
flip it out,
Yeah.
because another way of looking at that same thing is being neurotypical isn't necessarily a good thing.
No.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing either, but one of the things that is like, of course, there's the superpower thing, like, oh, she's going to think about things
Oh,
different.
I know.
So just like, it's just sort of neutral. Like there are really big advantages if your neurotype is part of the majority. There's going to be
Yeah.
things easier for you. The DMV will be less frustrating, like certain, not that it will be not frustrating, but like
I
certain
don't know.
things.
I was there recently and I almost had a
It's
panic
like,
attack.
but like certain things will be easier and certain things will be harder. Like if I asked you to solve a murder the way Sherlock Holmes did, that
Hmm.
would be harder for you. And
Hmm.
then if you ask me, that would be easier for me. But if you asked me to host a party and make sure everyone felt comfortable, that would be very difficult for me and probably somewhat easier for you to anticipate people's
Right.
needs and to be able to navigate that kind of
It's different.
social
Yeah.
setting. Neither one of those things is good or bad. Like nobody goes to jail, like nobody wins the Nobel Peace Prize. Like there's it's not good or bad. It's just like, of course, humans will have different skills.
Mhm.
You
And what
know,
if we had an environment that let people use their specific special skills instead of like blanketing everyone has to have this one skill? Like, no, like we should all be bringing different talents to the table.
yeah, and it is about making room. And I think anyone, whether you're a DEI advocate, if you have a professional role to play, or if you're literally just a mom or sitting around in a mom's group, like just making room, just making room for more differences
Mhm.
makes the world just more magical. Like so many surprises happen. So I want to tell you this super fun story. I was house hunting in Oxford in England. And one of the reasons that I suspect Oxford has a very high autistic population, by the way. Lots of people with special interests in university towns, right?
Oh, I grew up in a
Oxford has some
university
weird
town. That makes
majors.
sense.
Yeah.
There's kind of like
So,
odd people floating around just in general, like different, I shouldn't say odd, not good or bad, just like different people floating
yeah.
around campuses. Yeah.
And Oxford's very cool because people from all over the world want to study at Oxford. So it's very international. It's I think the city with the highest IQ in England. It's
Hmm.
like, so obviously like super smart people from all over the world. And even though, it's still a neurotypical world, there are some ways where the world is more comfortable for autistic people in Oxford. So I sit down in an English pub. We're ordering, fish and chips at ye olde pub that's been there since the 1600s. And there is a woman next to me who I later find out is a, biomedical researcher genius. And she is there with her son. He looks to be about 10 years old, and he has 35 books on German tanks.
Hmm.
And I was like, I have found my person. I'm like, here we go. And so this mom is like, she's working, she's like frantically on her phone. And we're just like having a casual meal. And the kid is like, Mom, can I do this? Mom, can I do that? Like, and so I just looked at him and I was like, Hey, you into tanks? And he was like, kind of looked down. And I'm like, Can you tell me what your favorite tank is? And he was like, The something, something with the something, something. I don't know what he said because I know nothing about tanks. My husband, it turns out, knows about tanks. So he's like, What do you think about this kind of tank? And we ended up meeting people in this neighborhood we were thinking of moving to. This kid knew so much about tanks. I learned so much. I had a whole free university level lecture from a 10-year-old. He took over, he was leading. I know from his mom now, like a super shy kid who doesn't normally talk at all.
Wow.
We hit the special interest button and we were able to connect. Mom
Wow.
got a little break. We didn't feel like we were babysitting. We felt like we were making friends with neighbors.
Yeah, you were learning things. Like how
It
cool.
was great. We had so much fun with him. And it turned out the house we were looking at was right across the street from where they lived. So we ended up not getting that house. But I was like, oh, we met. And this is what I mean about just like making some extra
Yeah.
room for differences.
Mhm.
There's so much you could learn and be delighted by just giving extra space for things not looking like maybe
Mhm.
what you think they should look like in a certain situation.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, making space. I love that. I love the Oxford story. Well, tell us, Dr. Angela, you and Matt, is Matt co-authoring the Adult Autism Home Assessment book? Okay, you got to tell us about this. So it's called Listeners. It's out now. Adult Autism Home Assessment. So it came out in April. We're recording a little bit before it, but it will be out when you're hearing this. So tell our listeners how they can get a copy, why you wrote it, all the good stuff.
Yes. So uh, I'm going to read the full title. The
Yay.
full title is Adult Autism Home Assessment, our definitive guide to accurate and affirming self-identification.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of people who think or wonder, am I neurodivergent? Often this happens when a kid gets a diagnosis. And because autism is just as hereditary as eye color, that usually means in most cases, one of the two parents is autistic or a whole bunch of grandparents. So a lot of times as an adult, you don't need a diagnosis. You don't need an IEP if you're 39, like I was. I didn't need school accommodations at that point. I didn't need, for legal reasons, I wasn't in a place where I needed to like file disability, but I wanted to know and I wanted a professional opinion. There are a bunch of reasons why it's not a great time to get a professional diagnosis unless you really need one. In England, I know we have wait times of up to 5 years. In almost every country, I think in Russia, it's 7 years, it's 3 years in Belgium. So a lot of people need to file for disability or need it for a lawsuit, need it for school accommodations, for other medical insurance reasons and things like that. So if you don't need a diagnosis, I really recommend you start with our book, Adult Autism Home Assessment. Matt has been a diagnostician for over 10 years in Kentucky. He has diagnosed hundreds, probably thousands of people at this point. And this is his method for diagnosis. It is not self-diagnosis. So it is a home assessment, but you will not do it alone. So it is a 3-part process that will require assistance. It will require at least one other person, but probably more like 3 other people to help you with it. It is comprehensive. It is definitive. And what I mean by definitive is at the end of this assessment, if you follow this process, you will know if you can identify as autistic, like for
Wow.
sure. If you go through this, you are officially knighted by Matt, who is a licensed professional psychologist in the state of Kentucky. He is making it official. Now, you won't be able to get accommodations, but this is his process. And then we've wrapped around the process therapy ideas, how to identify a good therapist, what you should be working on, how to how to integrate your identity and how to really work with that identity. And we have a really fun autistic dictionary at the back, which will help you learning a whole new language. And we've used a lot of those terms today, like we talked about double empathy. We've talked about how support needs. All of those terms are defined in the book, so you can start developing a language for yourself. So even if you're diagnosed and just want to work on integrating or believing it, one of the challenges that a lot of adults have is imposter syndrome because of people saying you don't look autistic. So whether you are officially diagnosed or not, or just wondering, going through this process will help you get to know yourself much better.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Like, one, I mean, it's not as intimidating as scheduling a formal assessment. It's comprehensive because, like you said, Matt's been doing this for years, and it also has a lot of the tools you'll talk about in your podcast together that you know works from a language and strategy and application perspective. So, what a wonderful gift. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I
Even
think
my
there's
kiddo, like it took a year to get her assessed, and we're
that's it. I
still
mean,
not qualified for disability yet. I mean, we're talking years. Good old state of Indiana. And that's only going to get worse probably under this sad administration. But yeah, and when I think about like accommodations that people need, I mean, these rarely are things that are super costly in the workplace. They rarely like hinder anyone's abilities. If anything, it probably makes it better for everyone, usually. So it seems quite silly that we would make this difficult.
yeah. So I want to tell just a little story here if we have
Yeah.
time. So before I was diagnosed, I had a real challenge with my temper and with anger. And one of the things, not even diagnosis, but really identifying as autistic helped with was helping me understand my personal individual sensory profile and what I needed. So one day, my husband and I were driving, and in the back seat was like um water. You know how you can get like a crate of water, like a tray of water. So there's probably like 4 6 packs in like a case, and they were rubbing up against each other, like and I have a lot of sensory stuff. And normally I would hear it, but not say something because it would be weird to comment on the sound of water. I wouldn't even say something to myself. So it's not like I was covering it up for someone else. I just wouldn't allow myself to have the experience of hearing the water because I wasn't going to be able to do anything. So why tune into it? And then as we were driving, that would be wearing on me and wearing on me and wearing on me. And then my husband would sneeze the wrong way. And I would be like, why do you fucking sneeze like that? And then I'd be in a fight. And then I'd probably say something
It
really
would
bad,
escalate.
would
Yeah.
get me fired. And then I would have to have these hard relationship repair conversations. And then I would be tired. And then the next day I would end up missing work or calling in sick. And it would unravel into days and days. And I would never, ever know it had anything to do with the water bottles. I would never make that connection. After doing some autistic centered therapy, understanding my sensory needs, we pulled out of the driveway. I heard squeak, squeak, two little squeaks. And I was like, hey, can you real quick pull over? I can tell the water is going to bug me. I'm just going to throw it in the trunk. He pulled over. I threw the water in the trunk. We drove away. We had a great time. Now, is that an accommodation? Yes, that is what an accommodation looks like. I have to know what my needs are. I have to ask for them to be met. But I mean, it's not even just like costing anything. It's like such a
30
net
seconds of time.
positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much upside and so much work to be able to do that. That sounds like, why wouldn't anyone know the water bottle? Like, just put the water in the trunk. Yes, obviously, I would have done that if I knew. But what I knew was, like many autistic people, I grew up having earaches all the time. I knew I had tubes in my ears. I knew that I have calcified stapes because I've gone to ear doctors. Did I know that was common for autistic people? No, I most certainly did not. No ear doctor ever mentioned it. So then I knew that I was very attracted to sign language and that sign language was one of my special interests. And that part of why I've wanted to learn sign language is I've always felt like I would lose my hearing. For sure. Knew that. Did I know that was connected to being autistic? Absolutely not.
That's
And
fascinating.
so it turns out I have an auditory processing
Mhm.
condition, very common among autistic people, that makes it difficult to separate noise. So I like could not separate my husband speaking from those squeaks. And so you're doing all this work,
Um,
which
yep.
then gives me a migraine. And have you ever talked to someone with a migraine? They're not nice.
hmm
They're going to
And
snap
then
at
like
you.
that displaced anger on something that had
Right.
nothing to do with it. Yep.
But I never connected those pieces without being able to
Yeah.
identify as autistic. So there's so many accommodations that come out of that. None of them cost money. Many of them don't even cost any time, but they never could have happened without that self-identification, or in my case, I had a professional diagnosis. But it doesn't matter. This is why in the book we say it's definitive, because at the end of it, if you've self-identified, we're going to have you do a sensory profile like that. And if you've self-identified and you've started making accommodations for yourself that are working, you're autistic. It doesn't matter whether you got a professional diagnosis or didn't. If the accommodations for autistic people are working for you, please keep doing them. It makes the
hmm
whole world better.
hmm
And I think everyone should know their sensory profile. Neurotypical people will probably need to make fewer accommodations,
Right.
but there's no reason everyone shouldn't understand how interoception, their understanding of their own body, works for them.
Yeah.
There's no reason why everyone shouldn't know their sensory profile and know how to ask for accommodations.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is appropriate at all, but I'm just thinking about the workspace. Like that would be like obviously a private activity to do, but if people felt comfortable talking about their sensory profiles, like how cool that would be. Because, you think about all these open concept floor plans, and I know now the pendulum swung the other direction, but I remember everyone having like their earbuds in, or like, someone who was like, I remember clipping their fingernails one time in the office and like trying,
Yeah, that's
just
a
people
train.
handle it. And like you said, one of my autistic clients can hear electricity.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
it's very distracting to her. She's in a very electrical heavy environment. I mean, wouldn't that just be so interesting to talk about if people felt comfortable? Because for me, as a very neurotypical person that probably has, I have not been diagnosed, so listeners forgive me, but I have some OCD tendencies. I just do. And so if things are not in their place, like in my office right now, if there was one thing out of place, I couldn't think straight for this interview. It would be in the background running, much like the water bottles for you.
Yeah.
And I just, and people are like, quit, like you're moving things like a millimeter, but it's like, it's not in the right place. Therefore, I can't think. Therefore, I'm going to be distracted and I can't be fully present. And no one wants that. That's not good for anybody.
Right. So like I love there's a creator on TikTok who has I think she is autistic. But she has a song that says if a label makes you happy, you should use it.
Hmm.
That's the whole song. She's like, people always talk about labels. If a label makes you happy, you should use it. And then she
Yeah,
has a very cute song. And I'm like, I don't care if people call themselves autistic or neurodivergent or neurotypical. Like the title doesn't matter to me, but I do think as humans, if we learned some things that autistics have to use to stay alive, the
right.
whole planet improves. So to stay alive, we have to learn boundaries.
Hmm.
There are two, this is a sliding scale, but there are two extremes. For some autistic people, they are not high masking. So they will just demand boundaries, and that often makes people not like us.
Right.
Um, for some people, often women, but not always, and people with multiply marginalized identities, they will be very high masking, so they won't set boundaries, and then they will hate themselves. So those are
Mhm.
like the two extremes. And obviously it's a continuum and it changes in certain circumstances. But in order to be healthy and autistic, the ability to know what works for you and doesn't is essential. There's no way to do it otherwise.
Mhm.
And by the way, who wouldn't benefit from that? Women who are so overextended and carrying so much of the mental load. I've read a lot of those books like Fair Play and
Oh,
all
Eve
like
Brodsky. Yeah.
women do. Yeah, I don't do that. I don't do that extra labor. You know that all the stuff they were saying about all the things women worry
They're
about?
like, no.
No, and I didn't have to unlearn that for some reason. Like the package my autism came with was like, well, why would I take that on? That would be unfair and
You're
ridiculous.
so logical. Yeah.
Right. I'm like, who would do that?
Like that sounds ridiculous.
Makes no sense. Like I read that book and I'm like, they do what now? Huh? Who would do that? Why? Are you kidding? So that is a very real experience lots of women have. And
Yeah.
learning to set boundaries like an autistic would benefit anyone. Like I really do
I
think.
love that. Yeah,
And
communicate your needs. They're just my needs. Like it doesn't have to be this whole big thing. It's just here's what's going to work better for me. You're going to get more out of me. You're going to work better with me. Like this is going to be a better relationship if we can just do these things.
yeah. So I advocate so much for learning your physical, Matt
Yeah.
calls it your meat body, better
Mhm.
than we have been taught to, because so many things are just assumed and autistic people just can't assume those things. We have to actually learn them. And it gives you a chance, if you are not autistic, to just like double check that shit. Be
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, that does
Yeah,
work.
that makes
Sweet
sense.
water
Yeah.
bottles, no worries. I'm good. Don't need to move those.
Yeah.
So
So interesting, Dr.
I would
Angela. Thank
love to see this done in every workplace, like especially if you do group orientations.
Yeah.
Just nobody loses, and there's nothing that has to be expensive. I know I've gotten pushback from organizations like, oh, it's going to be so much money, but moving water bottles doesn't, like, so many of these things don't even come into the realm of money.
I think 50% of accommodations don't cost anything. Like, and so
Wow.
we're not talking remodeling the office or anything like that. We're talking about reasonable accommodations, and that's also part of the law. So we
Right.
should
Oh,
be.
and there's that. Well, if we still have that law, do we have laws still?
Now we do. It's
It's April
interesting
though.
times.
I don't know.
I know. I
And
know.
that's why I say, like, there may or may not be more. There will not be more. There may or may not be fewer protections for like any sort of minority, but I'm speaking of the neuro minority here. That's why it's more important than ever. And by the way, it's going to help you everywhere for
Yeah.
you to take the lead on your own accommodations and providing them. So, maybe you won't get the lighting replaced in the whole office, but could you stand on top of your chair and unscrew the fluorescent light bulb and run to Walmart and buy a $10 lamp and stick it on your desk?
Mhm.
Just do that if it's not going to get you fired. Make as many accommodations as you can for yourself because they do build up. So you
Mhm.
won't get everything, and you probably don't have the budget to give yourself everything, but never miss an opportunity to make an accommodation when you can make an accommodation for yourself, because there'll be times when you can't.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. And small tweaks. Small tweaks. Look for the small ones first. And then, like you said, the cumulative effect is when everything's out of skew, it's going to have a much bigger effect on you.
Yeah.
Well, this
And
is amazing.
why community matters so much too, because in community, you will find out ideas from other people. I know I am still to this day frequently surprised where I'll be like, oh, I didn't think of that accommodation. That's brilliant. It's so easy. I can do that. So share your stories when you come up with an idea and be open to learning from others.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. Well, the podcast is the Autistic Culture Podcast, and the book is Adult Autism Home Assessment. Dr. Angela, it's been such a treat to have you today. Any parting words you want to leave for our listeners?
Yeah, I would just say thank you so much for having me. And if you are listening to this, you definitely know an autistic person. And if you, because there's a lot of us out there, and if you are awkward or wondering how to ask us about our autism, it's a question I get a lot. Ask about our special interests. And if you don't know how to ask that, just be like, don't say, how are you? We really struggle with how are you? And we
Mhm.
love being asked, like, what are you into? Are you researching anything right now? Do you have any new hobbies or interests? Tell me about your hobbies. We call it spin bonding. So spin
Mm.
bonding. And I don't know if you caught this one, but I did this with you. I do this with every autistic person, but you mentioned your daughter's autistic, and I'm like,
Mm.
what's
Like, what is she into? Hmm.
and then I will remember that. And if she happened to like jump into the room or something, I would immediately have gone into Wreck-It Ralph. You said she wasn't still into Moana, which was a bummer because Moana is one of my special interests. But I like made a note of her movies because for us, and this has actually been proven with brain scans and EEGs, for us, our special interests are just like they light up the same area that would light up for a neurotypical person talking about their mother if they had a positive relationship with their mother.
Oh, wow.
So we have a t-shirt in our T Public store that's friends, family, and fictional characters. And for us, a fictional character is the equivalent of your best friend.
Mhm.
So that connection to Wreck-It Ralph isn't just a movie she likes. That is a real person in her life that means a lot to her. She's watching that over and over again to spend time with Wreck-It Ralph. And so I honor and validate those things just like I would if I was introduced to like her brother or her best friend. So ask about our special interests. That's what we want you to do. Don't
Yeah.
tell us we're autistic. That's not
Yeah.
what I do.
I love that. I'll be paying attention more to that too, and in her special interests. Yeah. It's fascinating. But yeah, it's finding common ground. It's finding you're gonna build a relationship with somebody. You're going to have a better, productive relationship. Like it's a win-win.
Yeah, the way a neurotypical often builds a
Mhm.
relationship is we
What
call
do
it
you do? Yeah, like
yeah.
what are your hobbies? If
And
yeah.
that and what you're really doing isn't it's not like you're interested in their hobbies or what do they do, but you're like, how do I energetically feel with this
Hmm.
person? Like it's an intangible, but do I like the amount of words she used to answer my question? Like
Hmm.
if I said, what do you do? And you say nothing, I'm like, oh, I don't like that person. Or if I say, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm a teacher. I teach sixth grade. I love working with teenage girls. I know everyone thinks tweens are hard, but I love it. Then I'm like, oh, now I
Yeah, I
like
know.
those values. I find so that is how neurotypicals bond. Let me tell you, that does not work with autistic people. That is not it. What we want to do is mutual info dump. We want you to ask us what our special interests are, and then we're going to ask you what yours are, and we want you to have some. because that we're not
Oh, and that can be a
acting
challenge for a neurotypical person, right? It's like,
that's
oh,
why it's
shoot.
a double empathy problem, right?
Yeah.
We have to understand that you don't want to info dump, and you have to understand we do. So our part of the double empathy problem is to say like, "Oh, and what do you do for work?" and to like not grit our teeth. And
Hmm.
your job is to ask us about our special interests, and hopefully we can meet in the middle. So that is my connecting with the autistic people in your life, no matter what their support needs are. I assure you, they want to be asked about their special interests. And the
Cool.
only judgment you should have is the knowing that that is really important to them, not whether it should be or shouldn't be, just like you wouldn't judge somebody's job whether it should be their job or not. Just like, she's into Wreck-It Ralph, cool, let's talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, how humanizing. Oh, Dr. Angela Kingdon, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Thanks for all the amazing work you do. And listeners, be sure to check out their podcast, Autistic Culture Podcast, and grab an adult autism home assessment.
Yay, thanks so much for having me.